Hello! So I was on a Tudor forum a few days ago and I stumbled across a question which was which of Henry's wives was he best matched to? Who was the best suited of his wives? And it got me thinking that maybe that would make quite an interesting vlog post. So what I've done here is put together in order ranked from the least well suited to the best suited from 6 to 1 who I believe was Henry's best suited wife. It's obviously all pretty subjective. I've had quite a lot of fun putting it together and agonising over the position. So if you disagree, or if you've got anything to add, please do feel free to leave a comment below the video. So without further ado, here's how I got on. I'm pretty comfortable with having Anne of Cleves in a lowly position of 6th. Henry's marriage to Anne was an unmitigated disaster. The justification for ranking as 6th can be found through Henry's own words. Unable to accept the Anne in the flesh bore any resemblance to the one portrayed in Hans Holbein's commissioned painting. He's said to have proclaimed to the, by this point, much maligned Thomas Cromwell that he was not well handled, and after the first night as a married couple, it didn't get much better. He was supposed to have angrily reprimanded his chief minister by stating, "I like her before not well, but now I like her much worse." Henry had been unable to consummate the marriage due to his apparent disdain for her appearance and body odour, although these were probably excuses, but nevertheless it does paint a pretty sorry tale for Anne. Aside from the superficial side of things, there were language and cultural barriers, and the whole affair, the marriage to the annulment, was concluded in 6 months at the start of 1540. It also played a significant role in signalling the end of Thomas Cromwell's influence. He was executed a matter of weeks after the annulment. The ironic part about the whole Anne of Cleves episode is that history would judge her as the most successful of Henry's 6 wives. Her apparent willingness to go quietly was in stark contrast to what Henry had experienced with Catherine of Aragon, for example, and she was handsomely rewarded for this. She was frequently welcomed to court, referred to from there on in as the king's beloved sister, and given numerous properties, including Hever Castle, which of course was formerly a stronghold of the Boleyns. So not bad really for a short-serving queen that the king could barely stand the sight of. If you're ever looking for a Henrican midlife crisis, this is as good as it gets. By now, a rapidly ageing, debilitated, overweight tyrant, Henry was drawn to the 18-year-old beauty, Catherine Howard, presumably as a way of rediscovering his youth. Certainly the whirlwind courting and marriage of the fun-loving yet hopelessly naive Catherine temporarily helped the 49-year-old king rediscover his zest for life, and she was clearly at an optimum childbearing age, although the days of Henry being able to produce a child, for want of a better phrase, were probably beyond him by now. With that in mind, you could argue that she was actually a fairly good match from his perspective, but it's at this juncture that things nosedive pretty rapidly. Rumours soon circulated of a pre-contract wedding agreement with Francis Derham, who, to compound matters, Catherine had very unwisely brought into her household in an official capacity. Catherine then embarked on an ill-judged love affair with a courtier, Thomas Culpeper, a love note of which still survives to this day. The drama unfolded really at a rate of knots, and the bottom line was that within 16 months of the marriage, Derham, Culpeper, Lady Rochford, who had helped facilitate the meetings between Catherine and Culpeper, along with Catherine herself, were all dead, and the king left heartbroken and pretty embarrassed. Catherine's last words were said to have been, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper." This is almost certainly inaccurate, but it does epitomise the match between Henry and Catherine. It was a bad one. Henry's most famous queen. Given Henry and Anne went through years and years of trials, literally, and tribulations, which included a break with Rome and the death of many a key figure, including the likes of Fisher and More, you'd have thought that both would be fairly certain that theirs was a good match, a marriage made in heaven, but it wasn't. The passion they both had for each other, arguably more so on Henry's side, is undeniable. Surviving letters are testament to that. But having got what he wanted, Anne as queen, Henry very quickly realised that Anne didn't possess the qualities or attributes that he required in a queen, unlike her predecessor, who'd been a model of queenship the majority of her marriage to Henry. Opinionated, hot-headed, argumentative, flirtatious. Once Henry had what he wanted, it took him no time at all to tire of Anne. What she could give him that Catherine of Aragon couldn't was a son, an heir to the throne, yet numerous miscarriages later, Anne only had a daughter, Elizabeth, to show for the marriage. The miscarriage of a male in 1536 sealed her fate, and she was jettisoned dramatically from Henry's life. The fact that Henry was willing to go through the embarrassment of acknowledging and accepting as truth the trumped up and frankly fanciful adultery charges labelled against Anne indicates how desperate he was to get rid of her. Anne was duly executed on the 19th of May 1536, and just a day later Henry was betrothed to Jane Seymour. He then gave orders to have all evidence of her removed and was almost never to reference her again in his lifetime. Famous, yes. Dramatic, definitely. A good match. Marriage-wise, definitely not. Here the placings start to get a little bit more contentious. In terms of being a good match for Henry, you could argue that Catherine was the perfect match. Married in 1543 to 1547, up to the king's death, Henry needed someone at this stage of his life to provide companionship, to be pious, a queenly figure, and to nurse him through his, by now, many ailments. And Catherine did this. She was respected and she was experienced in the art of playing the good wife, having been married twice before. An intelligent woman, she was able to indulge in Henry's intellectual side while still paying service to his egotistical and misogynistic tendencies. She also played a leading role in bringing Henry's children back into favour. She got on well with Mary and Elizabeth and Edward, who she shared her deep-rooted Protestant beliefs with. The fact that Henry allowed Catherine to effectively act as regent in his place as he trundled off to France for one last expensive, pointless war in 1544 is testament to the trust he had in her. Of course, no wife of Henry could ever get away with no drama at all, and with her views on religion, she alienated herself from the pro-Catholic faction at court, who went as far as persuading Henry to sign her arrest warrant as she was investigated. Ever resourceful, though, Catherine's kind of "I am but a poor woman who needs guidance from your superior and enlightened knowledge" spiel was enough to appeal to Henry's vanity, and all was soon forgiven. As Henry played out his final years, I think it's fair and accurate to say that his marriage to Catherine was a success, and at that stage of his life she was an excellent match. How well matched were Henry and Jane? Well, the facts speak for themselves. Upon Jane's death in childbirth, having delivered Henry the son and heir that he'd craved and desired for so long, Henry is said to have gone into a very real period of mourning. He wore black for 3 months, spent days on end alone or with his fool, and grieved the loss of his wife. It was also Henry's express wish that he was to be buried next to Jane. I think that speaks volumes for his feelings towards her, especially given that his current wife at the time, Catherine Parr, was still very much alive. Henry wasted no time in marrying Jane, having executed Anne. There was clearly a natural affinity there. After years of turmoil and drama from Catherine through to Anne, the king was taken by Jane's virtue and the ease at which she quietly settled into life as queen, and that she'd show complete respect and devotion to him. Her motto of "bound to obey and serve" is a case in point. So why is she not at number one? Well, the caveat here is that we'll never know how events would have played out over time had Jane lived. Would the king have tired of her as he had done before? Would Jane have been able to maintain such subservient nature? Would Henry's eyes have wandered? Given they were together for such a relatively short period of time, and the fact that she'd given him the son that he'd so long desired, it's little wonder that she was regarded so highly in Henry's eyes. So with that in mind, it's just not quite enough for her to secure top spot in Best Matched Wife. Given the remarkable and bitter nature of the king's great matter and the ultimately sad and cruel demise of Catherine, it's easy to forget, I think, sometimes, that Henry and Catherine were married for 24 years. To put that into context, he was married to his following 5 wives for 14 years combined. What makes that so impressive, I think, is the changes that Henry went through in this time. Yes, he continued to change rapidly post-Catherine, but the Henry that disposed of Catherine eventually in 1533 wasn't the same 17-year-old she'd married back in 1509, far from it. Despite the numerous tragedies, including miscarriages and infant deaths, including that of their son, and despite the obvious extramarital activities of Henry, which produced an illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, Henry's and Catherine's marriage was, I think, on the whole, a successful and largely a happy one. Catherine was stately. She played the role of queen to perfection. She was the daughter of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. She knew how to be a queen, and she never failed to show support to her husband, even when tensions arose between England and Spain, and specifically between Henry and Ferdinand. Even at the most bitter, and when Henry was treating her appallingly, keeping her away from her daughter Mary, she still devoted herself undyingly to Henry. She just couldn't accept the fact that she was not his lawful queen in the eyes of God. Earlier in their marriage, he was entrusted to act as regent by Henry when he was abroad fighting the French in 1513. And the only thing that superseded Catherine's devotion, as I've just touched upon there, to Henry was her devotion to God. And this stubbornness and belief and value system played a big part in the long and traumatic years that would define her and their marriage. However, I'd argue that rather than being ill-matched, Catherine was more a victim of her advancing years. She was 6 years older than Henry, and had she still been able to bear the king children, it's not at all beyond the realms of possibility that Anne Boleyn could have remained an infatuation of Henry. But the securing of the dynasty was of paramount importance, and as time went on, it was clear that Catherine could no longer provide that, and Anne potentially could. And her skillful handling of the king and his undoubted passion for her were enough to result in one of the most famous matrimonial fallouts in British history. I don't think, however, that detracts from the fact that Henry and Catherine were, on the whole, very well matched. And I think if you took age and biology out of the equation, the position of number one for Catherine in this vlog would be even more emphatic. So there you go, they're my 6 ranked in order. Love to hear your comments. If you've enjoyed this vlog, you want to hear more, please do feel free to subscribe to my channel. Would love to have you on board. So in my opinion, Catherine of Aragon was the best suited to Henry. So grass isn't always greener, Henry.